What's up, everybody? This is the Booch, and welcome to episode 18 of my show, Booch Shoots On. And obviously, you can tell from the title and the shirt and the background and the cardboard cutout right there, you know what we're going to be talking about today. It's something that's happened unexpectedly, which is why I've had to put a lot of stuff that I've been working on over the last several months to the side to sit here and talk about this sad moment in the world of professional wrestling. And before I get into that, there's a few things I want to address. First off, you'll notice the Hulk rules stuff surrounding this video, and I did that for two reasons. One, Hulk rules, and two, because in order to fit myself and the cardboard cutout into the frame, I had to go into my OBS and shrink this into a square. But by doing that, I leave a lot of black stuff here, and that's not aesthetically pleasing to the eye. So I put the Hulk rule stuff in the background to help out with that. So that's why that background is there. So I want to address that so you're not confused, you're not focusing on it. You can just focus on me, which is what you should be doing when watching a Vinny Bucci video. Now, obviously I'm going to have a lot to say about the passing of Hulk Hogan. I've said a few things already on social media. I posted on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Haven't really said anything on TikTok yet. But before I get into that, there was one thing that I said that I want to address at the very top of this episode so there's no misunderstandings. I said, and I quote, Hulk Hogan was a legend, icon, and a talent that will be missed by true fans of the sport. The marks, of course, will celebrate the fact that he's dead, and they can all get fucked and stay off my page. And I would like to take this moment, if you follow me on my other social media and happen to see this, I want you to know from the bottom of my heart, I meant every word of that. If you are someone that is currently celebrating the death of Hulk Hogan, if Hulk Hogan dying is a joyous, happy occasion for you, I want you to get fucked and stay off my page. Don't bother commenting hateful Hogan comments underneath. I'll just delete them. Just walk away right now, because I don't want to talk to anyone that is happy about the death of Hulk Hogan. I don't want to talk about it on YouTube. I don't want to talk about my other social media. I don't want to talk about it out in public. Please keep it to yourself. I'm not fucking interested. Because I think anybody that is celebrating the death of Hulk Hogan is a piece of shit. Especially the IWC. If you're in the IWC and you're celebrating this, you are the biggest piece of shit. And if you're a worker in the business and you're celebrating it, you're an ungrateful piece of shit who should 100% be blacklisted and not allowed to work for any wrestling promotions. Any promotion that would book you after reading that is Outlaw Mud Show, hands down. And I'm going to tell you why I feel this way. Because I know for a fact that the same motherfuckers that are out here, especially the IWC, that are out here praising the death of Hulk Hogan, you're the same motherfuckers that every year when the Hall of Fame comes up and they announce the inductees into the Hall of Fame, and you're either happy about it or you're pissed off about it, or you go, this person doesn't deserve the Hall of Fame, or this person went into the Hall of Fame before this person, there's all these other people, or this person should be removed from the Hall of Fame, whatever the fuck. Whenever that shit happens, there's always that one question that illuminates around the social media wrestling world. And it goes a little something like this. Should Chris Benoit go into the Hall of Fame? That's an ongoing question. The fact that this is even still a question that people are asking in 2025 is fucking disgusting. Because I've had people in the past ask me, Vinny Bucci, do you think Chris Benoit should go into the Hall of Fame? And I give the same answer every time. Fuck no. Absolutely not. Never should he go into the Hall of Fame. And people would ask me, why? Why, Vinny? Why do you think Chris Benoit should not go into the Hall of Fame? Now, if you're subscribed to the Boochcast YouTube channel, in addition to this one, and you saw the Dark Side of the Ring episodes that I did on Chris Benoit, particularly the Part 2 episode of Chris Benoit, the one that has Nancy and Daniel in the thumbnail, if you heard that, you already know why I don't want Chris Benoit in the Hall of Fame. But just in case you haven't, or it's been a long time and you may not remember, I'll tell you exactly why. Because he murdered a 7-year-old child. Plain and simple. That, unlike what Hogan did, that is an unforgivable sin. Now notice, I didn't even bring up his wife. It's bad enough that he killed his wife. You could pretty much wrap it up right there that Benoit's a piece of shit. But under the proper context, depending on the situation, now obviously this does not apply with Nancy, but in general, if someone gets in a fight with a spouse or kills their spouse, depending on the context, maybe, it's a hard maybe, but maybe I can forgive that. What I cannot forgive is someone who would harm a child. If you're gonna kill a child, pump a child full of Xanax and smother him to death, and then place a Bible next to him, I cannot forgive that at all. Harming a child like that is unforgivable. Killing a child is unforgivable. In fact, I'll go as far as to say this. The only person in professional wrestling that is a bigger piece of shit than Chris Benoit is Grizzly Smith. Because the only thing worse than murdering a child is molesting one. There's your reason why I would never want Chris Benoit in the Hall of Fame. Now, when I say this, there's going to be some people, but I've also noticed when people try to defend Chris Benoit, and I can't take you seriously when you do, they latch on to one phrase. You'll notice this. All Benoit defenders, there's a lot of things they say. They use the CTE, or no, it was really Kevin Sullivan, like a lot of bullshit. But they all latch on to this one phrase that they repeat over and over and over again, that they want to apply to Benoit, but will never apply to the Hulkster. And that one phrase is, you have to separate the wrestler from the person. Oh, do I? Do I? I have to separate the wrestler from the person, but you don't? Is that the message I'm getting here? I have to ignore the fact that Chris Benoit killed his 7-year-old child. I should put that to the side because he was a great technical wrestler, because we're living in a time period where there's a lot of sick fucks in the wrestling world, because you care more about whether a guy can do tackle, drop down, leapfrog, hip toss, flip, flop, fly, and almost die with pointless acrobatics. That's the reason I should just ignore the fact that a 7-year-old child had to be buried in a casket. I'm supposed to ignore that. But when it comes to Hulk Hogan, I can't separate the wrestler from the person. Why? Because he didn't do all that crazy acrobatic bullshit? Because he was able to draw money and get 20,000 people to get up on their feet without having to do all the stupid flippy shit that wrestlers do today? Is that why? Because I got news for you. And I'm still waiting for someone to answer this question. How is the N-word, saying it, worse than killing a child? I'd love to hear that answer. Because really, if we're breaking it down, that's the most vile thing this man ever did. He said the N-word in a private conversation that was secretly recorded and leaked onto the internet. That's what people are crucifying this man for. If you can't realize how fucking stupid that is, I can't have a conversation with you. That's literally the worst thing this man did. This is why people are celebrating his death over that. And really, I got news for you. If you think Hulk Hogan is the only wrestler that has ever said the N-word, you're out of your goddamn mind. I can promise you, any wrestler from his era that you have ever worshipped, that you have ever bought an autograph from, or taken a picture with, or interacted with, I guarantee you, at least once in their life, that word came out of their mouth. I promise you that. Why? How do I know that? Because it's the time period they lived in. That word was thrown around a lot. Does that make it okay? No. But I'm going to say this. If you're going to nail the Hulkster to the cross for saying the N-word, there's a lot of other people you need to be nailing to the cross. Ric Flair, he said it. Jim Cornette, he said it. Jerry Lawler, he said it. Hell, there's a commentator in AEW right now called Excalibur. The worst commentator in all of wrestling. The man makes Byron Saxton look like Gordon Soley. That's how shitty he is. There's literally tape of him saying the N-word, and he's still the lead broadcaster for AEW Dynamite. He's still at the broadcast table today. Tony Khan wants to go on some crazy rant about, I banned Hulk Hogan from all my shows, and yet Excalibur does your commentary. But because Excalibur sucks off the Elite, he has a job. Because he gets on his knees while the Elite stands in a circle and bukakis all over his face. That's why he wears the mask, so he never has to wash his face and just lets the crusty cum dry all over his fat, ugly face. The hypocrisy is really what makes me angry. Because there are some people out there, there are black people out there that were fans of Hulk Hogan, saw that tape, and it made them see things differently. And I've always said in the past, they get a pass. If you're black and you're heartbroken by that, I've always given you a pass. Always. This is my one exception. You're allowed not to like him. You're not allowed to celebrate his death. That's where I draw the line. But I've always said, the white people who virtue signal, get a fucking life. Stop pretending you don't know anybody that's never said that word. I know plenty of people who have in my personal life. Some of them said it in a hateful way. Some of them were just singing a rap song. But I promise you, there is not a single sin that Hulk Hogan has committed in his life that can't be forgiven. None. But you'll worship a guy like Chris Benoit, who committed an unforgivable sin, and try to look past it because you love his wrestling. And that's why I say, fuck you to anyone who is celebrating the death of Hulk Hogan. Don't comment on this video. Don't comment on my social media. Don't talk to me in life. Get the fuck away from me because I don't want to hear it. Now I'll be back right after this.
We lost the biggest name in professional wrestling. And make no mistake, Hulk Hogan is the biggest name in professional wrestling. Hulk Hogan is the be-all and end-all when it comes to this business. Without Hulk, all of this stuff does not go on. This business doesn't boom the way it did and continues to do. Without Hulk Hogan, there is no match against The Rock for the greatest of all time. There is no house. There's no house in the Garden. There's no house in Toronto at the Superdome. There's no house in Sheboygan, Duluth, Des Moines, Bangor, and Bakersfield. Hulk Hogan will always be responsible for the house. And in this case, the house is in the entire professional wrestling business.
Big facts. Everything Bully Ray just said in that clip is big facts. And I wanted to play that for a moment because I feel like Bully Ray illustrated perfectly why Hulk Hogan is the biggest icon in the history of wrestling and the impact he had on the business. That he was the guy who drew the money for all the houses in the wrestling business. He was professional wrestling's biggest draw. And I also needed a break for a moment after that point that I had to make at the beginning of this video, but I had to get all that off my chest because my emotions are running high and I'm still emotional about this whole experience, so I want to get that off my chest. But now that I got that out the way, I'm going to get to the positive stuff right now. As I mentioned earlier in the video, I had a picture that I posted on social media of myself and Hulk Hogan, and I'll tell a little backstory on that. Back in 2017, when WrestleMania 33 took place in Orlando, Florida, myself and my friend at the time, Zach Scott, who you all know from the Boochcast as the Broke Soulless Ginger, we drove 7 hours to Orlando, Florida for WrestleMania 33. And obviously we had planned to go to WrestleMania, but also planned to do some other things in Orlando as well. And when we got there, we found out through some wrestling fans we happened to bump into at different wrestling events that Hulk Hogan was having an autograph signing at his new beach shop in Orlando, Florida. He had one in Clearwater, but he was opening up a new one in Orlando. So Zach and I got in the car, we drove to the beach shop to go meet Hulk Hogan. And obviously, when we got to the beach house, we discovered that you had to pay money to get into the beach house. Now, obviously, when it comes to autographs and pictures, I am aware as a fan that in some cases, I'm gonna have to pay money at an autograph signing. I don't get mad about it. I don't dispute it. I do it. I either pay the money or I don't get the autograph. I get that. But if you're gonna make people pay to get into the beach shop, put that on your fucking flyer. Now, I'm not mad at Hogan for this. I'm mad at whoever created that flyer. Tell people in advance that you gotta pay to get in. Because I just jumped in the line. And when I got up to the front, they were looking for a ticket. And I'm like, what ticket? I just got in the line. And they told me I had to get out of the line, buy a ticket, pay the admission fee, then stand in another line, like a VIP line or something, so I'd be able to go in. So they weren't gonna make me go all the way to the back of the line. They weren't douchey like that, which is probably the main reason I didn't snap. So anyway, eventually I go into the beach shop. I get to see all the displays, all the mannequins and stuff. They got one of Hogan in the yellow and red. They got the Hollywood Hogan in the black and white. They have him as Thunderlips. Never fear, Thunderlips is here. in the flesh, baby. The Ultimate Man versus the Ultimate Meatball. Of course, Rocky Balboa was the meatball. And I got a chance to go through the line, and then I get to meet Hulk Hogan. I got a couple words out. I was very, very nervous because this is a guy that I literally grew up watching on TV. And I know you're going to hear a lot of people say this, but for me, it's the God's honest truth. I grew up a Hulkamaniac. I grew up a Hulk Hogan fan. My dad and I bonded over wrestling. And that's part of the reason I think that professional wrestling is something I gravitated towards so much. Because it's literally the one common interest my dad and I have. It is. Now, granted, over the years, my father's kind of fallen out with wrestling, so he doesn't really follow it as much anymore. It's not exciting for him. But when I was a kid, that was something my dad and I bonded over. Because when it comes to TV shows and movies, we don't really like the same shows or the same movies. There's a lot of movies my dad likes that I don't. There's a lot of movies that I like that he doesn't. There's a couple that we both like, but for the most part, we're very different. And when it comes to TV shows, there's TV shows he wants to watch that I don't like. There's TV shows that I want to watch that he doesn't like. But we have a couple of interests in the middle. Like one of the few shows my dad and I both like to watch together, really, outside of wrestling, is Friends. But I'm doing a whole nother video on that for the Boochcast, so I won't get into Friends here. And then as far as movies go, there's one movie called The Pest with John Leguizamo that we're both fans of. So wrestling was really the one thing my dad and I both watched together. And we both loved Hulk Hogan. So Hogan is definitely somebody that had an impact on my life as a kid. So being able to meet him in person was a big deal. Now, up until this point, I've been working on the Regular Guys show. So I got used to meeting celebrities. I got used to meeting wrestlers, especially when I joined the show around the time WrestleMania came to Atlanta. So I got to meet a lot of wrestlers. So I got very comfortable meeting wrestlers. But meeting Hulk Hogan was a whole nother experience in itself. Because one of the things you always hear about when Hogan would go out to the ring, or Hogan would stand in a ring in front of 20,000 people, is the aura of Hulkamania, the vibe he puts off, the way he commands the room with just his presence. Before he even opens his mouth, before he even makes a move in the ring, you are already captivated by Hulk Hogan and the aura of Hulkamania. It's real. I'm here to tell you right now, that shit was real, because I felt it. He's just sitting there talking to me. He's just sitting there signing autographs, and he just spoke to me, and I could feel the aura. I didn't feel like I was talking to a human being. I felt like I was talking to like a whole nother entity, and it was very surreal for me. And I took the picture with him, shook his hand, thanked him, and then eventually got out of the line. And I remember driving back to the hotel with Zach, just in awe of what I witnessed, because it was that much of an experience to meet him. So that's just me meeting Hulk Hogan. I got the vibe. He was a very nice guy. And he is somebody that truly loved his fans and, for the most part, treated everybody kindly. Obviously, he had his bad days. A lot of people do. Some fans may have provoked him to being an asshole, because I know some fans are capable of that. You get your occasional assholes. But I was just in awe of meeting him. And again, when he was on TV, his promos were amazing. Every time he did an interview, you were glued to the screen and hanging on to his every word. Even if he was saying something that was crazy and ridiculous and out there, like most wrestlers from the 80s tend to do, you were still captivated. He was a guy that got you ready for whatever match you were going to see. He understood the psychology of wrestling. He understood how to tell a story. He understood how to read a room. He was a ring general long before Gunther took that as his name. Because Gunther likes to call himself the Ring General. But what people don't understand is Ring General is an insider term. The Ring General is someone who leads the match. He calls the spots in the ring. That's what a Ring General is. Hulk Hogan was a Ring General. Triple H was a Ring General. John Cena was a Ring General. Now, a lot of times in some matches, with the exception of the three guys I mentioned, a lot of times heels will be the ring general. The bad guy in the match will usually lead the match. But if you got somebody like a Hulk Hogan, a Triple H, a John Cena, they will usually lead the match if they're in the ring. Now, if they have to fight each other, sometimes they decide who's going to be the general for that night. And usually it goes to the veteran or the person with the most experience, or sometimes this guy's the heel, so I'll call everything. And they figure it out that way. But Hogan had that gift and knew exactly what to do. And he was truly the biggest icon in all of wrestling because he was the first to really go mainstream. Hulk Hogan had to fly to get to things that wrestlers today can walk to. In New York City, there was a baseball player that played for the Yankees. His name was Babe Ruth. Right now, currently in New York City, there is a place called Yankee Stadium where the Yankees play. The nickname for Yankee Stadium is the house that Ruth built. The reason they call it that is because when Babe Ruth came to the Yankees, he was sold to the Yankees from the Red Sox. They sold him there for $125,000 and a loan of $350,000 in order to fund a Broadway musical. That's why for years the Red Sox had their Curse of the Bambino. But anyway, Babe Ruth came to the Yankees and generated so much money for New York City. With all the championships they won, with how well he played, with how much the audience loved him. They made enough money to finally build their own stadium. That's why it's called the house that Ruth built. Because if it wasn't for Babe Ruth, there would be no Yankee Stadium. Without Hulk Hogan, WWE is not the corporate juggernaut that it is today. Yes, it's owned by a new corporation, the TKO shit. But WWE would have never been worth buying if it wasn't for Hulk Hogan. Triple H even said during the 10-bell salute, he said, we would not be standing here today together if it wasn't for him. Anybody that truly loves this business, works in this business, makes money in this business, understands that the reason professional wrestling is mainstream is all because of him. He led the charge. A lot of people live under the delusion, and I know a friend in particular who does, that Vince McMahon created Hulkamania, that Vince McMahon made Hulk Hogan. That's a fucking lie. Hogan became successful because of the success of Rocky III. Because in the late 70s, early 80s somewhat, Hogan worked in the WWE for Vince McMahon Sr., who's the Vince McMahon we all know that's his dad. Hogan worked for the dad first, the senior. And he got the call, the invite, to audition for Rocky III. Hogan went down, had the audition with Stallone, they worked in the ring, they did their thing, and Sylvester Stallone took one look at Hogan, loved his size, got him to cut a promo to see how well he could talk, and Hogan got paid $14,000 to play a wrestler in this movie. He was going to be gone for about 10 days. Vince Sr. tried to book Hogan for the Crockett promotion. Because back then, keep in mind, the WWE was just a New York territory. During this time, there were places called territories, for y'all that don't know. And each place had its own territory. WWE was the New York area. Jim Crockett, Crockett Promotions, the NWA, was in the Georgia area, the Carolinas. They had that area. Then you had Florida Championship Wrestling. Then you had Memphis. You also had Portland. You had Mid-Atlantic, Mid-South. There were different promotions and territories across the country. And they all sort of worked together. They had their own lines and boundaries that no one crossed yet. But sometimes they would make deals with promoters like, hey, can you bring this guy to come down and work for me? I'll send this guy to come work for you. Or make this guy available, give me extra weekend dates on this guy. And they would go and trade them off. They'd have a run in a territory, you would peak, and then go somewhere else. And then when you were done there, you go there, then you go here. Then eventually you circle back to the territory you were at before, and you just moved around town. And that's how wrestlers made their living, by going to different places. So Hogan was supposed to go to Crockett, but he said, no, I'm going to do this movie. And Vince said, Terry, because Hulk's his real name, he goes, Terry, you're a wrestler, not an actor. Imagine hearing that today. You're a wrestler, not an actor. Hulk said, it's just 10 days. You can spare me 10 days. I'm going to make this movie. He said, if you go to make this movie, you will never work here again. And he said, well, I guess I'm not working here again. And he left. So WWE basically said, Hulk, you're never coming back. And of course, we all know in wrestling, you never say never. And it's for reasons like this. Hulk goes to do Rocky 3. It becomes a global success. He was Thunder Lips, had the moment with Sylvester Stallone, and he became an instant sensation. Because after he was done filming Rocky, once the movie came out, all of a sudden, everybody wanted to book him. Because he went to Japan for a while, because Hogan was always over in Japan. In fact, in June of 1983, Hogan became the first International Wrestling Grand Prix tournament winner and the first holder of an early version of the IWGP Heavyweight Championship. And he did it by defeating Antonio Inoki by knockout in the finals of a 10-man tournament. And Antonio Inoki was like the Hulk Hogan of Japan. So he became the first ever IWGP Heavyweight Champion. And at the time, the championship was defended annually against the winner of the IWGP League of the Year. And that title held on for a while, and then later they brought in a IWGP Heavyweight Championship that was defended regularly. So they replaced the old belt with a new belt that was defended regularly, but the fact still remains, Hogan was the first ever IWGP Heavyweight Champion. And he later teamed up with Antonio Inoki and won the Madison Square Garden Tag League Tournament 2 years in a row in 82 and 83. So Hogan was a star in Japan. He was beloved in Japan. And then eventually, the AWA with Vern Gagne signed Hogan. And he went to AWA. And he was insanely over in the AWA because of Rocky 3. So Hulkamania was building up. He was selling his merch, because he was one of the first guys to really bring in the merch aspect, selling them out of his trunk, Hulk Hogan shirts. He was getting over as a star. And eventually, when Vince Jr., the Vince McMahon that we all know, bought the company from his dad, he decided he wanted to take over the whole business. He wanted to run all the territories out and basically create a monopoly. That was his goal. But he knew in order to do that, he needed the right talent. So he was grabbing talent from all the other territories, offering them more money. He would also steal their TV slots of the territories. And he did that with help from Jim Barnett. So from a business standpoint, yes, Vince did a lot of money-making moves. From the business standpoint, Vince did a lot to build that company up. But he needed a star worthy of bringing in all these people. And there was no bigger name than Hulk Hogan. None. You can pick all your faves that you want. None of them were more popular than Hulk Hogan. And even they would tell you that. The wrestlers of that era would tell you that same damn thing. They knew Hulkamania became a phenomenon. It was bigger than wrestling. There are people who have never watched professional wrestling a day in their lives. Can't tell you a single match, segment, or promo from it. But they know the name Hulk Hogan because he was everywhere. You got guys like The Rock and John Cena hosting Saturday Night Live. Hogan was the first wrestler to do that. The Rock, John Cena, Batista, they're all big Hollywood stars. A lot of wrestlers today are doing Hollywood movie roles. Some of them are even looking to go into acting full-time when their wrestling career ends. Hogan opened that door. Yes, Andre the Giant was in The Princess Bride. Do you know any other movies he's done other than that? None that are memorable. Roddy Piper, he was in They Live. How many movies did he really do? Not a lot. Hulk Hogan, he came in, had a plethora of movies. Suburban Commando, Mr. Nanny, Santa with Muscles, one of the Three Ninja movies. He made cameo roles in Muppet movies and Gremlins movies. He also did Little Hercules, Romeo and Juliet. That was a voiceover role. He did Mackenzie's Island, Three Ninjas High Noon at Mega Mountain, because Three Ninjas in the 90s was a huge franchise. So he played one of the later ones. The Ultimate Weapon, Spy Hard, The Secret Agent Club, and of course, the two biggest ones were No Holds Barred, which was like his first leading role in a movie, where he played a wrestler and Vince produced it. It had all those funny moments in them, like the bad guy calling everybody jockass, and also the scene where he grabs that guy and he goes, "What's that smell?" And the guy goes, "Dookie." And Hogan looks down and goes, "Dookie." And you're trying to keep a straight face shooting that scene. It's fucking hilarious. And of course, that's when Zeus came in. And later, Zeus became a character in wrestling that they used a while to build up No Holds Barred, but also get good storylines going. But another big one that later became a TV show, this is one of my personal favorites, was Thunder in Paradise. I loved Thunder in Paradise. That's probably my favorite of all the Hogan movies and TV shows. I even remember the theme song. Thunder in Paradise. Thunder in Paradise. Mess with thunder and you pay the price. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It sounded cheesy, but it was still fucking great. In fact, Hogan was so popular, they even made a TV show about him, a cartoon called Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling, where Brad Garrett was the voice of Hogan. But you would see Hogan in like live action scenes and stuff. Like the opening intro, he'd be walking down the street like holding his hands up, going like this, and all the kids would run around and gather around as they're playing the song. Hulk, Hulk, dun-dun-dun-dun, Hulk, Hulk. Like he was all over the place. Space Ghost Coast to Coast, Baywatch. They actually did a Bash at the Beach on Baywatch from 95. They actually did the Bash at the Beach 1995. They used clips of it in a Baywatch episode. And they also brought in the Macho Man and Ric Flair and Vader, because those were the guys that Hogan and Macho Man fought at Bash at the Beach 95. He made cameo roles in Walker, Texas Rangers, Suddenly Susan. And of course, they did Hogan Knows Best, which wasn't all that great. And of course, Brooke Knows Best. That one was okay. He did other like interview stuff like the 80s Called, and he made cameo appearances in Camp WWE. He also had a thing called Hulk Hogan's Celebrity Championship Wrestling, which is a reality show that had celebrities getting into the business, which is funny today because you see so many of them trying to get in the business, like Todd Bridges, who I personally have interviewed, Trishelle Canatella, Dustin Diamond, the late Dustin Diamond, Danny Bonaducci, Eric Esch, Aaron Murphy, Dennis Rodman, who ended up becoming the winner that year, Frank Stallone, who's related to Sylvester Stallone, ironically, and of course, Tiffany Darwish and Nikki Ziering. Like, these were people that actually became part of the show. And Bill Goldberg made cameo appearances. Rob Van Dam made a few cameo appearances. They had Team Nasty and Team Beefcake. So like Brian Knobbs was captain of one team and Bruce the Barber Beefcake was captain on another team. And they would do that week after week until there was the last man standing. And it was so incredibly amazing. Where of course Hulk Hogan, Eric Bischoff, and Jimmy Hart were the judges. And it was a hell of a great show. So Hogan kicked open a lot of doors in Hollywood. Like again, you see a lot of wrestlers today with reality shows. Hogan was one of the first. So yes, there are other wrestlers who have been successful in Hollywood. There are guys with bigger names. But he kicked the door open so they could walk in. And WWE became so successful, they created that headquarters that used to be called Titan Towers. Now it's just the WWE headquarters. That's the house that Hulk built. Because the success of Hulkamania and the money that he drew in wrestling, the fans that came out in droves to support him, that big run he had in the 80s, where he had that 4-year run as champion, long before Roman Reigns would. And here's the difference between Hogan's run and Roman's run. When Hogan was on top for 4 years, he never got stale during that time. It wasn't until the mid-90s that Hulkamania would become stale. But during the 80s, it was the hottest ticket in town. And WWE became the billion-dollar juggernaut that it is because of Hulk Hogan. Hulkamania is the foundation for everything you see today. And not only that, when Hulk got stale in WWE and he left completely, he ended up going to WCW. And when he went to WCW, when he signed with Ted Turner, when Turner bought Jim Crockett Promotions and turned it into WCW, he legitimized WCW as a threat to WWE. Because people started gravitating to WCW because of Hogan. New eyes were on that product that weren't there before. Fans came in that weren't there before. Back then, they literally would have to have tons of seat fillers. They would literally have to pay people to sit in the crowd just to do a TV taping. They struggled to get people in. Hogan brought the business in. Now again, things did get stale around 95, 96, when he was the yellow and red. But then what happened? He turned heel, became Hollywood Hogan, formed the NWO with Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, and WCW went to new heights. And he reinvented himself and became the greatest heel in the business. He went from being the #1 babyface to the #1 heel and pulled it off spectacularly. And indirectly grew the WWE again. Because when the NWO got popular and they were kicking WWE's ass in the ratings for those 83 consecutive weeks, Vince had to pivot and create the Attitude Era to combat the NWO. And that's when we got Stone Cold and The Rock and The Undertaker and D-Generation X. And yeah, The Undertaker was there in the early 90s, but they made a more attitudinal version of that. So in a way, Hulk Hogan was instrumental in the Monday Night Wars. He's the reason the Attitude Era existed. That later brought in the guy who would become Hogan's successor, Stone Cold Steve Austin. And yeah, before that, Austin was kind of building his own thing. Sure, he had the whole Austin 316 around the King of the Ring time. But WWE hadn't made that pivot to the Attitude yet. They were still kind of PG. So yeah, even if Stone Cold became Stone Cold, he wouldn't have got to go as far as he did if they were still PG. You would have had a watered down Stone Cold, not a flipping the bird, 4-letter words, drinking beer, kicking the shit out of the boss. Because the boss wasn't even on TV. They had a different boss running things. They had the Jack Tunneys and the Sergeant Slaughters running stuff as authority figures. Because it wasn't until the Montreal Screwjob that Vince was revealed on camera to be the owner of the company and started making those Mr. McMahon appearances that would later propel Austin to the next level. And that's why I always say, without Hulkamania laying the foundation, there is no Austin 316. That don't exist. Hulk Hogan laid the foundation for Austin to come in and then take WWE to another level, to where they were able to turn the tide and eventually beat WCW. So that's the impact that Hogan had on the business. He put wrestling on the map in a way that had never been done before. He brought in a mainstream audience that for a very long time wasn't there. And then eventually, John Cena would come in and have his run as he's going on this retirement tour. And they're calling him the greatest of all time. But here's the crazy part. One of the things John Cena is known for is granting the most Make-A-Wishes. He's the king of Make-A-Wish. But before John Cena became the king of Make-A-Wish, Hulk Hogan was the original Make-A-Wish. He was the one doing everything for the charities. He was the one doing everything for the kids. And he took great pride in being a role model for kids all over the world. And that's one thing about Hogan I can respect. Because while we would find out later he's an imperfect human being, like we do with most celebrities that we meet, here's the great thing about Hogan. And someone mentioned this online, I found it interesting. He was great at hiding his imperfections as he encouraged children to do the right thing. And to me, that's just as valuable of a role model. Because, yes, you can be a person that's never done anything wrong and motivate somebody to do better. But in my opinion, the best motivators, the best influencers are the ones who aren't perfect, who've made mistakes, but will teach you a different path. And that's what Hogan did. Yes, Hulk Hogan used steroids, but never once did he tell kids to inject themselves with steroids. Yes, Hulk Hogan did cocaine. So did everyone in the 80s. Number one thing people talk about when they said why people did so much cocaine, it was the 80s. If you had money, you were doing cocaine. You'd be hard-pressed to find a wrestler in the 1980s that didn't do cocaine. Almost all of them did. But never once did he tell kids it was cool to do cocaine. And yes, sadly, we did see that racist video that got leaked. But never once did Hulk Hogan encourage anyone to be racist. He never in his life, you cannot find a video of him in front of a group of people spreading hate. He never influenced children to hate. Even if he might have had a little of that inside of him, which I don't think he did. I think he just had a bad day and a bad moment and he said some shit he should have never said. That's just how I feel. But you'll never find a video of him encouraging kids to behave that way. Why? Because deep down he knows it's wrong. This is a man who told people, train hard, say your prayers, eat your vitamins. That's what he encouraged kids to do. And there's a lot of kids who were inspired by him, looked up to him, and saw him as a hero. And he took that seriously. Like I said, he wasn't a perfect man, but he was perfect for wrestling. There are a lot of wrestlers in this business who owe that man a debt of gratitude. If you've ever stepped foot in an arena and wrestled in front of thousands of people, Hogan made that possible. If you got to enjoy as a wrestler walking down to the ring and experiencing the pageantry and the spectacle of WrestleMania, you owe a debt of gratitude to Hulk Hogan because he made WrestleMania. He was the star of WrestleMania. You can't talk about the history of WrestleMania and not mention Hulk Hogan. The iconic moments that have happened in wrestling because of Hulk Hogan. Him body slamming Andre the Giant is a moment people still talk about all these years later. Him and Mr. T battling in the first one ever with Piper and Orndorff. That steel cage match with King Kong Bundy. Forming the Mega Powers with Randy Savage. And watching them explode at WrestleMania 5. Him and the Warrior, WrestleMania 6. Hulk Hogan trying to build the next big star. From a man that people say he didn't put anybody over. He put a lot more people over than you think. Because he might not have jobbed a whole lot, but he put people in main event spots with him because he knew he would make money. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you can tell the difference between someone who's an actual pro wrestler and someone who's just a mark in boots and tights. Here's how you can tell. And this is mostly for promoters, but if you happen to catch this as well in interviews as a fan, watch for this. If you ever hear a wrestler talk about their dream match and they say, I want to work with this guy. I want to get in the ring with him. We would have a great match. We would tear the house down, 5 stars, memorable high spots. Fans will remember it. That's going to be a great match. That's a mark. A true wrestler will look at a guy and say, I want to work with him. Put me in the ring with him. I can make money with him. I'm telling you, you put us in a match, we will draw money, we will sell tickets, we'll put asses in seats. We'll have a great match, but the building will be sold out. That's a wrestler. Because that's who Hogan cared about. He didn't care about having a 5-star banger. He cared about selling out the building. If he saw a guy that he could make money with, he put him in that main event spot. And a lot of those guys, they were just grateful to have the main event spot. Most of them didn't even care if they got the belt or not. Because they knew back then, if you worked the main event with Hogan, you were going to make big money. And that's what wrestlers cared about, at least back then. They didn't care about the belts. They cared about the wallet. They wanted to make money. And you knew you were going to make big money if you worked with Hogan. Or if you went to the towns that Hogan was in. You knew the house was going to be big and you were going to get a good payout. Even if you were on the bottom of the card, you stood to make a lot of money if you worked with Hogan. That's why when people say he made a lot of money for wrestlers, that's what they meant. Because back then, there were no guaranteed contracts yet. Back then, you had to draw a big house to make big money. Otherwise, you didn't make a lot. You had to draw a house. That's why people wanted to work with Hogan. Because they knew they were going to get the big money. And Hogan understood back then, the champion gets paid the most. That's why he fought to keep his spot at the top. People see it as politicking. He sees it as, I'm trying to protect my spot up here. Because I got to make money. I got to provide for my family. These guys down here are trying to take my job. I don't want somebody to take my job. And if a lot of you looked at wrestling that way, you would understand why he did the things he did in wrestling. He wasn't trying to destroy anybody's career. He was trying to keep his spot at the top. Because that's what he cared about. Making money and feeding his family. And that's how wrestlers, real wrestlers, look at this company. They don't see it as you just taking their spot. They see it as you trying to take food off their children's plate. You're trying to stop me from feeding my family. You're trying to stop me from putting my kids in the best schools. You're interfering with my livelihood. And if you want my spot, you're going to have to take it. And if you ain't man enough to take it, you're going to get rolled over. That's why at the Performance Center, there was a banner that was up. I don't know if it's still there, but they used to have a banner that said, you are not here to earn a spot. You're here to take a spot. Because that's what wrestling was built on. You want my spot? You come take me head on. Prove to the higher-ups you deserve it. And Hulk was willing to help those that he saw as talent. Diamond Dallas Page told the story about how Hulk went to Bischoff and said, hey, give Dallas a bit of a push. Hogan was also the one that when it was time for DDP to become the world champion, he went to Bischoff with Kevin Nash. And they said, it's time for DDP. He's earned it. He's earned that spot. In fact, I saw an interview with Tony Atlas recently where he said Hogan helped Coco Beware get his job back and how Hogan would work these 16-hour days doing all these appearances. And that's why he had the spot at the top. Because not only was he wrestling matches, but a lot of times there were sponsors that paid big money to sponsor the show, and in exchange, Hogan would have to go make appearances. Like if a rich guy was throwing a party, Hogan had to go to that party and mingle with rich people in exchange for the sponsorship money. So a lot of times Hogan was working every day in order to build WWE up. In fact, he even got Vince McMahon to bring Sergeant Slaughter back. Slaughter did this in an interview. He said they want him to work like Tombstone or Tugboat or Earthquake or Warrior. And Hogan said, I don't want to wrestle them. I want to wrestle Sergeant Slaughter at WrestleMania 7. So they made it happen. They brought back Sergeant Slaughter. They turned him heel. They put the world title on him. He beat the Ultimate Warrior to win the title. Then they went to WrestleMania. And Hogan beat Slaughter at WrestleMania. Now some people look at that as, oh, he brought Slaughter back just so he could beat him. Slaughter didn't care. He got a chance to work the main event of WrestleMania. He got to become the world champion. He got to make big money. Also, here's another little tidbit. The one man Hogan has wrestled that he's never beaten is Sting. Every time he's had a match with Sting, Sting won, including their final match in TNA. And speaking of TNA, do you know who Hulk Hogan helped out the most in TNA? Bobby Roode. See, everybody gave Bobby Roode shit when he lost at Bound for Glory because everyone thought he should have won there. But what they don't realize is, at the time, Bobby Roode was a babyface. There was nowhere to go. So instead, he lost. James Storm would beat Kurt Angle for the title. Then about a week or two later, he faced Bobby Roode. Bobby Roode took the beer bottle, smashed James Storm in the head, turned on him, went heel, got the 3 count, and won the world title. And what happened to Bobby after that? He became one of the longest reigning TNA champions of all time. Now, whether he still has that record, I don't know. But I do know he won the title and became the it factor of professional wrestling. That was Hogan booking. Who else did he help? Jeff Hardy. When Hogan turned heel at Bound for Glory one year, it was in Daytona Beach where he turned heel in 96, him and Bischoff. They made Jeff Hardy the world champion. They gave the ball to Jeff Hardy to make him the world champion of the Immortal faction. And the only reason it went to shit was because Jeff was still on the pills and the booze. And he showed up to Victory Road, pilled up, and Sting had to beat him quickly, 1, 2, 3. Had he stayed sober, he probably would have beat Sting and had a long title reign. But that ended up going to shit. But that was Jeff's doing, not the Hulksters. Another guy that got a big push, Abyss. Hogan was working with Abyss the second he got there. Let him wear his Hall of Fame ring, practically called him his son. And they had the big tag match with Abyss and Hogan against Ric Flair and AJ Styles. So there's a lot of people that Hogan has helped in this industry. Like Kurt Angle, who became the first man in the history of wrestling to tap out Hulk Hogan. Gave him a big boost. He put over The Rock at WrestleMania 18. He even did a job for Triple H. Of course, he won the world title at Backlash, but then eventually they had a number one contenders match, and Triple H won that, where he would go on to face The Undertaker after Hogan dropped the belt to The Undertaker again. So there's a lot of guys that the Hulkster helped in this business. And at the end of the day, that's what wrestlers cared about. Can you make money? That's what wrestling's about. That's why you see certain matches booked the way they are. It's not about the moves you can do. That's the basic part of your job. If you know how to work, if you know how to wrestle, congratulations. You are fulfilling the bare minimum of what is required of you. There's other levels to this shit that you have to climb, and Hulk could do them all. You want to see Hulk technically wrestle? Pull up his matches from Japan. All the things that these guys can do in a ring, Hulk can do them. He didn't do them in America because he didn't have to. That's not what they paid money to see. Hogan could do the things he did in that ring and still get 20,000 people to jump out of their seats. He could still take that audience on an emotional roller coaster ride. And he did it better than all of them. Hulk Hogan is the greatest of all time for those reasons. And if you're making a serious Mount Rushmore and not just a fanboy one, Hulk Hogan is on every Mount Rushmore. We can debate the other 3, but if you don't have Hogan on there somewhere, you don't have a real Mount Rushmore. You're just picking and choosing who you love growing up. Now, if you want to know what the real Mount Rushmore is, for real, I'll tell you what it is. And it goes in this order. Bruno Sammartino, Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold Steve Austin, John Cena. That's the Mount Rushmore of pro wrestling. Why? Because those 4 guys were mainstream stars who defined the eras they were in. They were number one and had no equal. They were the top guys in their era, in their prime. They defined the eras of wrestling. That's why that is the real Mount Rushmore. Without Hulk Hogan, the wrestling business is not where it is today. He laid the foundation for everything that exists in wrestling today. Without Hulkamania, there is no Austin 316. Without Austin 316, there is no hustle, loyalty, and respect. Without hustle, loyalty, and respect, there is no American Nightmare. There is no Acknowledge Me. Because Roman Reigns can call himself the Tribal Chief. You can throw those ones in the sky and acknowledge him. He can also call himself the head of the table. And maybe he is today. But without Hulk Hogan, there wouldn't be a table in the first place. And that, ladies and gentlemen, will wrap up this episode of Booch Shoots On. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button and ring that bell to be notified so you never miss another episode of Booch Shoots On, as well as other additional Booch 365 YouTube content. I'll talk to you guys next time. Until then, pizza, baby!
And what you gonna do when Hulkamania and the largest arms in the world run wild on you?